I'm Amanda Wilson, 35 years old and CEO of CyberShield Technologies. Funny how success in the business world means nothing when your own family still sees you as their disappointing daughter. Despite building a multimillion-dollar company from scratch, my parents introduced me as just Amanda at family gatherings. Last summer's barbecue was no different, with my mother calling me useless while serving potato salad. But everything changed when my sister's boss walked in, looked straight at me and asked, "Why is the CEO here?" Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you've ever felt invisible in your own family. Trust me, what happened next is something you won't want to miss. Growing up in suburban Chicago shaped more than just my accent. Our two-story colonial on Maple Street represented everything about my parents, Catherine and Robert Wilson: traditional, practical, and painfully conventional. The manicured lawn, the white picket fence, the flower beds that never dared grow out of their designated spaces. Everything had its proper place and purpose, including their daughters. My sister Stephanie was 4 years older and the perfect daughter by all parental standards. She got good but not exceptional grades, played volleyball but never too competitively, and dated nice boys from church. She studied education in college, became an elementary school teacher, then transitioned to a comfortable administrative job at a respected technology firm. The golden child who never caused waves. Then there was me. By age 8, I was dismantling our family computer while my parents were at work, figuring out how each component functioned before carefully reassembling it. When they discovered what I'd done, my father wasn't impressed by my curiosity or ability. Instead, he was furious about the expensive equipment I could have damaged. "Amanda, this isn't a toy. What is wrong with you?" he shouted, his face turning that particular shade of red I'd become all too familiar with. "This computer cost $2,000. But I put it back together," I explained, confused by his anger. "I wanted to see how it worked." My mother shook her head. "Honey, girls don't need to know about computer parts. Why don't you help me bake cookies instead?" That was the first time I recognized the pattern that would define my childhood. My interests were merely playing around, while Stephanie's conventional activities were building her future. School only reinforced this dichotomy. I excelled in mathematics and science, particularly computer science, once it was offered. In 6th grade, Mr. Jackson, my technology teacher, recognized something in me that my family couldn't see. "Amanda, have you ever considered programming?" he asked after I'd completed the class assignment in 10 minutes while other students were still struggling with the first step. "My parents say computers are for playing games," I replied, repeating what I'd heard at home. Mr. Jackson frowned. "Well, I think you have a natural talent for this. Would you like to learn some basic coding after school?" Those after-school sessions became my sanctuary. Under Mr. Jackson's guidance, I wrote my first program at 11 years old. When I showed my parents, my father glanced at the screen and said, "That's nice, sweetie. Don't spend too much time on this hobby, though." The science fair in 8th grade should have changed their perception. I developed a simple algorithm to optimize school bus routes, reducing fuel consumption by 14%. I won first place and qualified for the regional competition. My parents attended, but their enthusiasm paled compared to their reaction when Stephanie was named captain of the volleyball team the same week. "It's great that you're good at math stuff," my mother said on the drive home, the science fair trophy sitting forgotten in my lap. "But remember, boys don't like girls who are too smart. They find it intimidating." High school brought new challenges. While other girls worried about prom dates and popularity, I was teaching myself Java and Python, building small applications, and participating in online coding forums. My username CodeGirl96 became known in certain programming communities, though no one in my real life recognized my growing expertise. When college application season arrived, my guidance counselor, Ms. Peterson, called my parents in for a meeting. "Amanda has exceptional talent in computer science," she explained. With her grades and extracurricular projects, she could apply to top technology programs. My father shifted uncomfortably. We were thinking something more appropriate. Maybe business administration? Or communications. Something versatile. With all due respect, Mr. Wilson, Miss Peterson continued, your daughter has a rare aptitude. It would be a shame not to pursue it. Despite their reservations, I applied to top computer science programs. When the acceptance letter from Stanford arrived with a full scholarship, I was ecstatic. My parents were lukewarm at best. California is so far away, my mother lamented. And tech is such an unstable field. Wouldn't you prefer something more reliable? Meanwhile, Stephanie's decision to attend the state university for education was celebrated with a special dinner and gifts. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. My first holiday break from Stanford was eye-opening. 3 months surrounded by ambitious, innovative people who valued what I could do had changed my perspective. When I tried to share my excitement about my projects and professors during Christmas dinner, my father interrupted. Amanda, not everyone wants to hear about computer mumbo-jumbo. Stephanie, tell us about that nice Anderson boy you mentioned. That night, lying in my childhood bedroom, I made 2 decisions that would alter my life path. First, I would stop seeking my family's approval or understanding. And second, I would succeed so dramatically that they couldn't possibly ignore it. Both decisions, I later realized, came from the same wound, but would lead to very different outcomes. Stanford was like finding water after wandering in a desert. Suddenly, I was surrounded by people who spoke my language, who didn't find my passion for technology odd or inappropriate. For the first time, being exceptional was celebrated rather than downplayed. My computer science program was challenging even for someone with my background. Late nights in the lab became routine, complex problems consuming my attention for days at a time. I thrived on the intellectual stimulation and the company of equally driven peers. Professor Margaret Reynolds became my academic mentor. The code is impressive, Amanda, she said, reviewing my project. But what stands out is how you think about the human element in your design. That's rare in this field. Under her guidance, My roommate Emily Martinez became my closest friend and emotional anchor. An art major with a minor in computer graphics, she brought creativity and perspective to my sometimes too logical approach. You need to remember there are humans on the other side of your code, she would remind me when I'd get lost in technical details. The summer after junior year, I participated in my first hackathon. Our team developed a security protocol that identified phishing attempts through behavioral analysis. We won first place, and a representative from Microsoft offered me a summer internship on the spot. That internship opened doors I hadn't imagined possible. Working alongside established security experts, I developed practical applications for theories I'd only explored academically. By the end of summer, my supervisor recommended me for their competitive post-graduation recruitment program. My personal life took an unexpected turn when I met Daniel in an advanced algorithms class. Intelligent, ambitious, and seemingly supportive of my career goals, he quickly became my first serious relationship. You're not like other girls, he said on our third date. You actually understand what I'm talking about when I discuss my projects. I was flattered, not yet recognizing the backhanded nature of the compliment or how it echoed my family's exceptionalism. For 8 months, we were inseparable, collaborating on projects and pushing each other academically. The cracks appeared during senior year when job recruitment began. As offers started coming in for both of us, Daniel's supportive facade began to crumble. The breaking point came when I received an offer from Google with a salary $15,000 higher than his best offer. Maybe you should consider taking something less high pressure, he suggested over dinner. Long term, when we have kids, you'll want flexibility. I haven't even started my career, I replied, stunned by his presumption. And we've never discussed children. The argument escalated until he delivered an ultimatum: choose between the demanding career path I was headed toward or our relationship. It wasn't really a choice. We broke up the following week. The pain was acute but clarifying. Like my family, Daniel had been comfortable with my abilities as long as they didn't outshine his own. It reinforced a painful lesson: success might mean walking a lonely path. Graduation approached with multiple job offers. These Silicon Valley jobs burn people out, my father cautioned as we discussed my options. There's an opening in the IT department at my company back in Chicago. Lower stress, good benefits. Dad, I'd be turning down six-figure offers to manage printer problems and reset passwords. My mother patted my hand. There's more to life than money, dear. What about starting a family? These tech companies work you to death. I accepted a position with a promising cybersecurity startup in San Francisco. The role was technically entry-level, but the smaller company structure meant more responsibility and learning opportunities than a traditional corporate environment. My decision coincided with Stephanie's engagement announcement. Any attention my career news might have received was immediately eclipsed by wedding planning discussions. In a way, it was liberating. Moving across the country with my family's attention focused elsewhere allowed me to build my new life without constant questioning or undermining. My first job proved challenging in unexpected ways. Despite my qualifications, I was initially assigned basic coding tasks, while male colleagues with similar or lesser credentials were given more substantial projects. Rather than complain, I completed my assigned work efficiently, then voluntarily tackled problems others avoided. 3 months in, I identified a significant vulnerability in our client portal during a routine code review. Instead of simply reporting it, I developed a solution, documented it thoroughly, and presented it to the lead developer. This is impressive work, he acknowledged, especially since it wasn't your assignment. I noticed the issue and had the solution. I replied simply. It seemed inefficient not to implement it. That initiative caught the attention of our CTO, Gabriel Russell. He reassigned me to the core security team, bypassing 2 promotion cycles. Some colleagues resented my rapid advancement, but most recognized that my skills warranted the position. Within 18 months, I was leading my own team, developing innovative security protocols that became the company's most profitable product line. I learned to navigate office politics, to present my ideas confidently in rooms full of skeptical men, and to mentor junior developers the way Professor Reynolds had mentored me. Each step forward confirmed what I had always known, but my family had never accepted. This was exactly where I belonged. The idea for CyberShield Technologies didn't come in a dramatic eureka moment. It emerged gradually through my work with clients, recognizing a pattern in the market that others had overlooked. While major corporations had access to sophisticated cybersecurity solutions and small businesses could use simplified software packages, mid-sized companies fell into a dangerous gap. Too complex for basic protection, but unable to afford enterprise-level security, they were increasingly targeted by cyber criminals. I spent 6 months researching this market segment, developing prototypes, and crafting a business plan during evenings and weekends. When I felt confident in the concept, I requested a meeting with Gabriel. I'm resigning, I told him directly. I've identified a market opportunity I want to pursue. Gabriel leaned back in his chair, studying me carefully. You're one of our top performers, Amanda. What would it take to keep you? This isn't about compensation, I explained. I've developed a security framework specifically for mid-market companies. I believe in it enough to build my own company around it. To his credit, Gabriel didn't try to talk me out of it. Instead, he offered connections to potential investors and became one of my first informal advisors. My parents, predictably, were horrified when I called to tell them my plans. You're quitting a perfectly good job to do what? My mother exclaimed. Start some internet business? Amanda, be sensible. The tech bubble burst once before, my father warned. All these startups end up failing. At least keep your job while you try this side project. I tried explaining the market research, the planning, the opportunities I'd identified, but their concerns remained focused on stability and conventional measures of success. The conversation ended with my mother sighing, "Well, at least you can come home when it doesn't work out." I rented a tiny studio apartment in Oakland to reduce expenses and converted half the living space into an office. My savings would cover approximately 8 months of development and basic living costs. The clock was ticking from day one. The breakthrough in building— "That was impressive," he said, extending his hand. Jeffrey Parker, Infrastructure Security Specialist. "I'd love to hear more about your research." Jeffrey became my co-founder 3 weeks later. His expertise in network infrastructure perfectly complemented my software security background. Together, we refined the prototype and developed our business strategy. Finding initial funding proved to be the most demoralizing part of the startup journey. We pitched to 12 venture capital firms in 2 months. The rejections followed a pattern I recognized from my earliest days in technology. "The concept is solid," one investor said, "but we question whether you have the leadership experience to scale a company." Another was more bluntly sexist. "Cybersecurity is a tough space with demanding clients. Have you considered bringing on a more experienced male CEO who could be the face of the company?" After particularly frustrating meetings, I would call Emily, who had relocated to San Francisco for an art director position. "They don't see me," I vented after one rejection. "They see a young woman playing at business." "Then fund it yourself until they can't ignore you," Emily replied. "You've always done your best work when people underestimate you." We bootstrapped for 4 more months, living on ramen and coffee, developing our product during 18-hour days. Jeffrey and I hired our first employee, Patricia Sullivan, a brilliant programmer who believed in our vision enough to accept equity in lieu of a market-rate salary. Our breakthrough came from an unexpected source. At a Women in Tech networking event, I met Angela Winters, a retiring CISO from a mid-sized healthcare company. She listened to my pitch, asked pointed technical questions, then smiled. "I've sat through hundreds of security presentations," she said. "Most focus on features, not actual business problems. You understand what keeps executives up at night. I'd like to introduce you to some people." Angela became our first angel. Our first office was a converted warehouse space shared with 3 other startups. We expanded the team to 7 people, all technically overqualified but drawn to the challenge and potential. We ate lunch together daily, often working until midnight, bound by the shared belief that we were building something important. The first major client came through Angela. "Your competitors tried selling me comprehensive packages with features we'll never use," he told me during our presentation. "You're the first one who started by asking about our specific vulnerabilities." They signed a 2-year contract worth $300,000. The validation was worth even more than the revenue. With a reputable client implemented successfully, others followed. Within 8 months, we were serving 15 mid-sized companies across healthcare, legal, and financial services sectors. Tech publications began noticing our rapid growth. Cybertech Monthly ran a feature calling our approach revolutionary in its simplicity. Security Week named me one of their emerging leaders in cybersecurity. We moved to a proper office in downtown San Francisco and expanded to 20 employees. The day we reached 1, "That's nice, honey," my mother said after I shared the news. "Speaking of money, have you started a retirement account?" Stephanie's husband has been investing since he was 25. I stopped sharing professional achievements with my family after that. Their inability to recognize my success wasn't going to diminish it. 18 months after founding CyberShield, we closed our series of funding round, raising $8 million at a valuation of $30 million. The company that had started in my tiny apartment now employed 42 people and served clients across the country. As I signed the final investment documents, I remembered my father's warning that I could come home when it doesn't work out. Home, I realized, was no longer a place I had left behind, but something I was building for myself and the people who believed in my vision. 3 years after founding CyberShield Technologies, We had grown beyond my most ambitious projections. With 57 employees, a portfolio of 120 clients, and annual revenue approaching $15 million, we had established ourselves as the leading cybersecurity solution for mid-sized businesses. Our downtown San Francisco office occupied the entire 15th floor of a sleek glass tower with views of the Bay Bridge, a far cry from my converted apartment workspace or our shared warehouse beginnings. Industry recognition came steadily. Fast Company named us to their Most Innovative Companies list. Forbes included me in their 30 Under 40 feature on young entrepreneurs. I was invited to speak at major technology conferences and consulted on cybersecurity panels for industry standards. During this period of explosive growth, my sister Stephanie made an unexpected career move. After several years as an elementary school teacher, she accepted an administrative position at Vertex Systems, a mid-sized technology company. What she didn't know, and what I found grimly amusing, was that Vertex was one of our competitors in the cybersecurity space. "I'm moving." "That's interesting," I replied carefully. "What prompted the change?" "The pay is better, and there's actual growth potential. Plus, the tech industry is booming. I should have followed you into it years ago." The irony was almost too perfect. My sister had unknowingly taken a position supporting a man whose company competed directly with mine. Richard Bennett and I had met at industry events several times, though always in professional settings where my role as CyberShield's CEO was front and center. Stephanie had no idea. "What exactly does your company do again?" she asked as an afterthought. "Something with computers, right?" I gave her the simplified explanation I'd developed for non-technical people. "We provide cybersecurity solutions for medium-sized businesses." "Oh," she said with minimal interest. "Vertex does security too, but for real companies, not just small businesses." I didn't correct her misconception about our market segment or mention that CyberShield had recently won 2 clients away from Vertex. Some boundaries between professional and personal life seemed necessary to maintain. Over the following months, Stephanie occasionally mentioned her work during family calls, unaware of the connection. She shared office gossip about product delays and executive tensions, inadvertently providing competitive intelligence. I never used this information, maintaining ethical boundaries, but found it surreal that my sister knew more about my industry than my role in it. Even more bizarre was the revelation that Richard Bennett technically reported to me in certain contexts. CyberShield had been selected to lead an industry consortium developing security standards for healthcare data, and as chair of the steering committee, I oversaw contributions from multiple companies, including Vertex. Richard attended quarterly meetings where I led discussions and assigned action items, apparently never mentioning this to his assistant. My parents remained steadfastly unimpressed by my growing success. When my mother called, she would ask perfunctory questions about that internet business before moving quickly to updates about Stephanie's life or neighborhood gossip. During one particularly frustrating conversation, I mentioned being featured in the Wall Street Journal. "That's nice, dear," my mother responded. "Did I tell you that Stephanie and Jason are looking at houses in Oakbrook? For bedrooms. They're planning for children, you know." The subtext was always clear. Real success meant marriage, children, and a conventional lifestyle. Building a multimillion-dollar company paled in comparison to these traditional milestones. Christmas dinner that year brought the family disconnect into painful focus. Gathered around my parents' dining table, the conversation revolved around my cousin's recent engagement, my aunt's garden club victories, and Stephanie's house hunting. When my father finally asked about my work, it was framed dismissively. "So, is this computer security thing still going well? Making enough to cover your expenses in San Francisco?" I took a measured breath. "We're projecting $22 million in revenue next year, Dad. I think I can cover my rent." My mother patted my hand. "It's wonderful you have this little success, Amanda. But don't you worry about stability? These technology fads come and go." "It's not a fad, Mom. Cybersecurity is one of the fastest growing sectors in technology. Still, my father interjected. Jack and Linda's daughter just made partner at her law firm. That's real, established success. Something to build a life around. I excused myself early that evening, citing work demands. Sitting in my childhood bedroom that night, surrounded by debate trophies and science fair ribbons my parents had never fully valued, I confronted an uncomfortable truth. No amount of professional achievement would ever be enough to change their perception. Behind the growing public success of CyberShield, I struggled with the emotional toll of this fundamental disconnect. I began seeing a therapist, Dr. Sarah Goldstein, to address the persistent feelings of inadequacy that even my accomplishments couldn't fully erase. Success doesn't heal childhood wounds, Dr. Goldstein observed during one session. Sometimes it just gives us more resources to distract ourselves from them. She was right. I had developed workaholic tendencies, regularly putting in 80-hour weeks and missing social events. My diet consisted largely of delivery food eaten at my desk. I'd canceled my gym membership after realizing I'd visited only twice in 6 months. My personal relationships suffered as well. After Daniel, I'd had 2 brief relationships that ended similarly. Both men initially claimed to admire my ambition, but eventually grew resentful of my schedule and success. One complained that I made him feel unnecessary, the other suggested I was too independent. Neither seemed to understand that my drive wasn't about proving something to them, but to myself. In the absence of family support, I had built a surrogate family of friends and colleagues who understood my journey. Emily remained my closest confidant, now creative director at a major advertising agency. Jeffrey and his wife included me in family gatherings. Patricia, my first employee, had become a trusted friend as well as our chief technology officer. Together, they formed a support system that validated both my professional achievements and my personal worth in ways my biological family never had. I learned to celebrate milestones with people who genuinely appreciated them rather than seeking approval from those unwilling or unable to give it. Still, as another family gathering approached, I couldn't help hoping that something might finally bridge the gap between my reality and my family's perception of it. I had no idea that the annual summer barbecue would provide that opportunity in the most unexpected and public way possible. The annual Wilson family barbecue had been a tradition since before I was born. Every July, relatives from across Illinois and neighboring states would descend on my parents' suburban backyard for an afternoon of grilled meats, potluck sides, and the particular brand of passive-aggressive commentary that characterized our family dynamics. In previous years, I'd made excuses to miss the event, citing important meetings or business trips. This year, however, Emily convinced me to attend. "You're avoiding them because you're still seeking their approval," she pointed out during our weekly coffee meetup. "Go to the barbecue as the successful woman you are, not the daughter seeking validation." "Easy for you to say," I replied. "Your parents frame your finger paintings from kindergarten. And that's exactly why you should go. Stop giving them power over your self-worth." Reluctantly, I agreed she was right. I booked a flight to Chicago for the July weekend, promising myself I would attend with confidence rather than apprehension. The morning of the barbecue, I stood before the hotel mirror carefully considering my outfit. The choice felt oddly strategic, like dressing for a particularly challenging negotiation. I settled on a casual but clearly expensive sundress, subtle jewelry including my company's first profit celebration watch, and comfortable yet stylish sandals. Professional enough to signal success, but not so formal as to seem trying too hard. I rehearsed responses to the inevitable questions and comments during the drive to my parents' house. "No, I'm not dating anyone at the moment. I've been focused on growing my company." "Yes, San Francisco is expensive, but I can afford it. The security industry is actually quite stable, Dad." Pulling into the familiar driveway, I took a deep breath and reminded myself of Emily's advice. I was no longer seeking approval. I was simply sharing space with family members who had chosen not to recognize my achievements. The reception was exactly as expected. My mother offered a distracted cheek kiss while simultaneously directing my uncle where to set up additional lawn chairs. My father gave a perfunctory hug before returning to the grill, his conversational domain during these gatherings. Neither asked about my flight, my work, or my life in California. Meanwhile, Stephanie and her husband Jason received the full welcome committee treatment. My mother exclaimed over Stephanie's new haircut, my father clapped Jason on the shoulder with questions about his golf game, and various relatives gathered around to hear updates on their house hunting progress. I poured myself a glass of wine and circulated through the backyard, engaging in small talk with extended family members. Aunt Eleanor, my mother's older sister, offered her standard backhanded compliment. "Amanda, you look so professional. Finally putting some meat on those bones, I see. That California diet must be agreeing with you." Uncle Harold, my father's brother, barely acknowledged my career when I mentioned a recent international expansion. "Internet stuff, huh? I still don't trust online banking myself. Too many hackers." The irony that his financial information was likely safer because of companies like mine wasn't worth explaining. My cousin Jessica, a college student studying economics, showed genuine interest in my work until my mother interrupted. "Jessica, don't let Amanda bore you with computer talk. Come help me set out the desserts." As relatives continued arriving, I noticed Stephanie growing increasingly animated. She pulled my mother aside, whispering excitedly and gesturing toward the driveway. "Richard said he might stop by." I overheard her telling my mother, "My boss. Can you believe it? He's in Chicago for a conference and actually accepted my invitation." My stomach dropped. Richard Bennett, VP at Vertex Systems and my direct industry competitor, was coming to my family's barbecue. The same Richard who sat across from me at industry meetings, who knew me as the founder and CEO of CyberShield Technologies. Before I could make yourself useful, Amanda. Take this to the buffet table. As I arranged the bowl among the other sides, I heard my mother's voice carrying across the yard as she spoke to my aunt. "Stephanie's boss is coming by. An actual vice president. Such an important connection for her career." She lowered her voice, though not enough. Unlike Amanda with her little computer project. Just a glorified secretary playing businesswoman in California. The familiar sting of dismissal washed over me, but years of boardroom negotiations had taught me to maintain my composure. I continued arranging food as if I hadn't heard, though several nearby relatives glanced awkwardly in my direction. Stephanie approached, practically vibrating with excitement. "Amanda, you have to be on your best behavior when Richard arrives. This could be huge for my career if he sees me in a good light outside the office." "I'm always on my best behavior," I replied evenly. "You know what I mean. No weird tech talk or showing off about your startup. This is important." Before I could respond, commotion at the front gate indicated a new arrival. Stephanie smoothed her dress and plastered on her most professional smile as Richard Bennett walked into the backyard. I recognized him immediately, of course. Tall with salt and pepper hair, wearing casual but clearly expensive weekend attire, Richard had the confident bearing of someone accustomed to authority. We had last seen each other 3 weeks earlier at a cybersecurity summit where I had delivered the keynote address. Stephanie rushed forward. "Richard, welcome to our family barbecue. Let me introduce you to everyone." She led him toward my parents, making introductions along the way. I remained by the buffet table, wondering how this incredibly awkward situation would unfold and whether I should intervene before the inevitable collision of my separate worlds. My father puffed up visibly at meeting an executive, asking Richard about market trends and management philosophies as if they were peers. My mother fawned in a way that made me cringe, offering him special access to the premium scotch usually reserved for my father's closest friends. "And this is my husband Jason," Stephanie continued, completing the family introductions. He works in commercial real estate. Richard shook hands politely, making appropriate small talk while accepting a drink from my father. His gaze continued scanning the gathering until it landed on me. His double take would have been comical in any other circumstance. "Amanda," he said, clearly confused. "I didn't expect to see you here." Stephanie looked between us, puzzled. "You two know each other?" Before I could respond, Richard's confusion cleared, replaced by obvious embarrassment as he connected the dots. "Wait," he said, looking from Stephanie to me and back again. "Wilson. Stephanie Wilson." I never made the connection. He turned to my parents, who were watching with growing confusion. "Why didn't you mention your daughter is the CEO of CyberShield Technologies?" The backyard fell silent. My father's spatula clattered against the grill. My mother froze with a serving spoon suspended midair. Stephanie's mouth opened and closed without producing sound. "What did you say?" my father finally managed. Richard looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Amanda Wilson. She's the founder and CEO of CyberShield. One of our main competitors, actually." He turned to me. "I had no idea Stephanie was your sister." "She's never mentioned it." "She didn't know," I said quietly. "Didn't know what?" my mother interjected, her voice higher than normal. Richard looked genuinely perplexed now. "That her sister runs one of the fastest-growing cybersecurity companies in the country. We just lost the Meridian Health contract to CyberShield last month." The serving dish my mother had been holding slipped from her fingers, hitting the patio with a dramatic crash. The sound seemed to break the spell of silence, and suddenly everyone was talking at once. "CEO?" my father repeated. "Competitor," Stephanie whispered. My Aunt Eleanor stepped forward. "Amanda, is this true?" I nodded, meeting Richard's still confused. The silence that followed my statement was absolute. Even the neighborhood ambient sounds seemed to pause as 2 decades of misunderstanding collapsed into a single moment of revelation. Every eye in the backyard was fixed on me, expressions ranging from shock to confusion to dawning embarrassment. My father recovered first, his face flushing that familiar shade of red. "What kind of game are you playing, Amanda? CEO of what company?" Richard, still standing awkwardly between my parents, cleared his throat. "CyberShield Technologies. They're valued at over $200 million based on their last funding round. Amanda founded it 4 years ago." He glanced at me apologetically. "We're direct competitors in several market segments." I sit across from her in industry consortium meetings monthly. My mother's hand fluttered to her throat. 200 million? That can't be right. 227 as of last valuation, I corrected quietly. "Though that's not public information, Richard." He nodded, professional enough to recognize his overstep. "Of course. Apologies." And Eleanor stepped forward, her earlier condescension replaced with a beaming smile. "Amanda, darling, why have you been so modest about your accomplishments? We had no idea." Uncle Harold suddenly remembered our earlier conversation. "Is that what you meant by international expansion? Your company is going global." "We opened offices in London and Singapore last quarter," I replied simply. The transformation was both vindicating and infuriating. Relatives who had dismissed me minutes earlier were now pressing forward with questions and congratulations. The invisible woman had suddenly become the center of attention. My father set down his grilling tongs and crossed his arms defensively. "If all this is true, why haven't we heard about it? Why the secrecy?" I met his gaze steadily. "There was no secrecy, Dad. I've talked about my company for years. I've been featured in business publications. I've sent articles and interviews. You and Mom just weren't interested." "That's not fair," my mother protested weakly. "We asked about your work." "You asked if I was making enough to cover expenses," I corrected. "When I tried to share actual milestones, you changed the subject to Stephanie's house hunting or Cousin Brad's promotion at the insurance company." Cousin Jessica pushed through the crowd. "I knew it. I read about you in my business innovation class last semester." I told Mom it had to be the same Amanda Wilson, but she said you worked in IT support or something. The backyard had divided into distinct reaction zones. Most relatives were gravitating toward me with newfound interest. My parents remained frozen by the grill, processing the public undermining of their narrative. And Stephanie stood apart, her face a mask of complicated emotions. I excused myself from the growing crowd of curious relatives and approached her. We should talk privately. She nodded stiffly and led me into the house, through the kitchen, and into our father's study. Once the door closed behind us, she turned to me. How could you let me take a job with your competitor without warning me? It wasn't the opening I expected. You never told me where you were interviewing. You announced you'd taken the position after the fact. But you knew afterwards. You let me ramble. I maintained appropriate professional boundaries. I replied carefully. I never asked about Vertex, never used any information you casually mentioned, and never revealed anything that would compromise either company. That's not the point. Stephanie's eyes welled with tears. You made me look like a fool in front of my boss. In front of our entire family. I didn't do this, Stephanie. I didn't create this situation. For years, I've tried to share my professional life with all of you. You chose not to listen or take it seriously. She paced the small room. But CEO? A company worth hundreds of millions? How could we not know this? Because you decided who I was a long time ago, and no evidence to the contrary could change that perception. I was just Amanda, the computer geek, the one with the cute little internet project. Stephanie stopped pacing and really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. Is that how you think we see you? It's how you've treated me. Today, before Richard arrived, Mom called me just a glorified secretary playing businesswoman. That's after building a company from nothing, employing nearly 60 people, and being recognized as an industry leader. Understanding slowly replaced defensiveness in her expression. I never realized. I guess I just accepted Mom and Dad's version of your life without questioning it. That was easier than forming your own opinion, I acknowledged. For all of you. A knock at the door interrupted us. My father entered without waiting for a response, his expression a complex mixture of anger and confusion. Your mother is upset, he announced, as if this were my primary concern. I imagine she is, I replied. Finding out you've been dismissing your daughter's significant achievements in front of others must be embarrassing. Now wait just a minute, he bristled. We've always supported you. Have you, Dad? When was the last time you asked a substantive question about my company? When have you ever acknowledged that I've built something valuable? He faltered. We didn't understand all the technical details. You never tried to understand. You decided my interest in technology was a phase, then a hobby, then a job you could barely describe. No matter what I achieved, it was never as important as conventional success markers like Stephanie's relationship or house. My father glanced at Stephanie as if seeking alliance, but she remained silent, her own reassessment visibly underway. Your mother, and I just wanted security and happiness for you, he said, his voice losing its defensive edge. All this startup business seemed so risky. And yet here we are. I've created my own security. I've defined my own success. I just never received your recognition for it. The truth hung in the air between us, decades of misunderstanding distilled into a single, uncomfortable reality. My father looked suddenly older, the certainty that had characterized his parenting replaced with the dawning recognition of a profound misjudgment. Stephanie broke the silence. I need to go talk to Richard. He's probably completely confused by all this. She left us alone, father and daughter, standing amid the debris of collapsed assumptions. $200 million? He finally asked, his voice quieter. The company valuation, yes. Though that's not the point, Dad. What is the point then? That I needed you to see me. Not who you thought I should be or who you assumed I was. Just me as I am. He nodded slowly, not quite ready to apologize, but perhaps beginning to understand. You should probably go talk to your mother. I found my mother in the kitchen, mechanically arranging cookies on a serving tray, though the backyard festivities had clearly derailed. Her eyes were red-rimmed when she looked up. "Why didn't you make us understand?" she asked. "I tried, Mom. For years I tried." She shook her head. "Not hard enough. You should have known we wouldn't grasp all this technology business unless you really explained it." Even now, she was placing the responsibility on me. Some patterns were too deeply ingrained to change in a single revelation. "I have a company to run," I said simply. "I don't have the energy to convince my own family of my worth anymore." I returned to the backyard where Richard was engaged in conversation with Jeffrey, who had apparently been summoned by Stephanie. My co-founder looked up with a supportive smile as I approached. "I was just telling Richard about our healthcare security protocol," Jeffrey said, clearing up some competitive misconceptions. Richard nodded respectfully. "Impressive work, especially the HIPAA compliance automation. I see why Meridian went with your solution." The professional courtesy felt surreal in my parents' backyard, surrounded by potato salad and my childhood memories. Yet it was also clarifying. In this world, my authority and accomplishments were simply facts, not subjects for debate or dismissal. "I think I should go," I told them. "This has been a lot for everyone." Richard nodded understandingly. "For what it's worth, I've always respected your work, even as a competitor. Your sister clearly had no idea. It's not uncommon to compartmentalize professional and personal lives." Jeffrey squeezed my shoulder supportively. "I'll walk you out." As we made our way to the front gate, relatives approached with questions and belated congratulations. I responded politely but briefly, the emotional toll of the day catching up with me. Emily was waiting in her rental car at the curb, as we had planned for a post-barbecue escape regardless of how the day unfolded. One look at my face told her everything. "That bad?" she asked as I slid into the passenger seat. "Worse. Then better. Then complicated." I leaned my head back against the seat. Richard Bennett showed up. "Your competitor, Richard?" "Stephanie's boss, Richard." I nodded, then began laughing, the absurdity of the situation finally hitting me. You should have seen their faces, It was like I'd been speaking another language for 20 years, and they suddenly got universal translators. Emily pulled away from the curb. "Are you okay?" The laughter faded, leaving exhaustion in its wake. "I don't know yet. But for the first time, they actually saw me. Really saw me. That's something, I guess." As we drove away from the neighborhood that had shaped me, I felt the first tears break free. Not tears of sadness or even vindication, but of release. The little girl who had dismantled the family computer searching for understanding had finally been seen, even if decades too late. Monday morning came with its own unique challenges. I flew back to San Francisco late Sunday, emotionally drained but somehow lighter, as if the confrontation had released a pressure valve I hadn't recognized was dangerously overloaded. Richard had requested a meeting first thing, which wasn't surprising given the awkward intersection of personal and professional boundaries. We met at a neutral coffee shop halfway between our respective offices. "That was quite a revelation," he said after we had settled with our drinks. For what it's worth, Stephanie was mortified. "That makes two of us," I replied, "though for different reasons, I suspect." Richard nodded thoughtfully. "She's actually quite talented in her role. Very organized, excellent with clients. I'd hate to lose her over this situation." "I have no intention of interfering with her career, Richard. We've always kept personal and professional separate." "Too separate, perhaps," he observed. "But that's not my business. Professionally speaking, I wanted to assure you that nothing Stephanie may have mentioned about Vertex projects will affect our competitive standing. I've already spoken to our legal team." The irony wasn't lost on me. "I've never used anything she mentioned, Richard. She's my sister, not a corporate intelligence asset." He seemed relieved. "Good. That's good. One more thing. There's an industry committee forming on standardizing security protocols for international data transfers. the Commerce Department is involved. I'd like to nominate you to chair it." The offer was significant, a professional acknowledgement that transcended our competitive positions. "I'd be honored." "Thank you." We parted with newfound respect, the barbecue incident having strangely clarified our professional relationship rather than compromising it. Back at CyberShield, I briefed Jeffrey on the family fallout and Richard's committee nomination. Always my emotional ballast, he focused on the positive outcomes. "So your family finally knows you're a badass. Richard respects you enough to suggest you for a leadership position. And you've cleared the air after years of miscommunication. Sounds like a win to me." "It doesn't feel like winning," I admitted. "More like surviving an earthquake. Everything's changed, but the damage is still there." The aftermath played out gradually over the following weeks. My parents maintained radio silence for 10 days, then my mother called on a Tuesday evening as I was working late. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began without preamble. "About us not seeing you." I set aside my laptop, "I found those articles you mentioned sending. They were in my email, flagged for later reading." Her voice softened. "I never opened them." The admission was small but significant. "Why not?" I think I was afraid of not understanding. It was easier to stick with what I knew about you from when you were younger than try to understand this new world you'd entered." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was perhaps the most honest conversation we'd had in years. "I'd still like you to read them," I said. "Not the technical details, but to understand what I've built." "I will," she promised. "And Amanda? Your father and I are proud of you." We should have said that more. The conversation wasn't a miraculous healing of old wounds, but it opened a door that had been firmly closed. In the weeks that followed, my parents made tentative efforts to engage with my professional reality. My father asked specific questions about the company structure and financing. My mother requested the simplest explanation possible of what our security software actually did. They were trying, in their way, to step into my world rather than insisting I conform to theirs. It was imperfect and sometimes awkward, but it was progress. Stephanie and I had our own reconciliation over coffee when she visited San Francisco for a Vertex training seminar. Free from the family dynamics that had shaped our relationship, we spoke as adults with our own distinct paths. "I always thought you looked down on my choices," she confessed. "That you saw teaching or administrative work as beneath your abilities. And I always thought you judged me for not following the traditional path," I replied. "For prioritizing career over relationships." She smiled ruefully. "We created quite the narrative about each other without actually talking, didn't we?" "Family specialty," I agreed. Stephanie stirred her latte thoughtfully. "Richard speaks very highly of you, you know. After the barbecue disaster, he told me I should be learning from my sister rather than competing with her." "Competing? We've never been in competition." "Haven't we?" "For attention, approval, the right way to be a Wilson daughter." She shrugged. "At least on my end. I was so busy being the good daughter that I never questioned why that definition was so narrow." Her insight surprised me. Perhaps we had both been constrained by roles assigned long ago, playing our parts in a family drama without questioning the script. "I'd like to know my sister," I said finally. "The real Stephanie, not just my parents' version of you." "I'd like that too." We began a tentative rebuilding, starting with professional mentorship. Stephanie was indeed talented at client relations and project management. She began considering a more substantial role within Vertex, with my encouragement and occasional advice. Our relationship evolved from the prescribed sister dynamic to something more authentic. We didn't agree on everything, nor did we need to. The space for difference without judgment was itself a kind of freedom. Professionally, CyberShield continued its growth trajectory. We expanded to 90 employees, opened an Austin office, and increased our international client base substantially. The committee Richard nominated me for led to significant industry connections and a profile in the New York Times business section, which my mother proudly framed and displayed in the living room. My personal life expanded beyond work as well. At an industry charity gala, I met Michael Lawson, a cybersecurity legal specialist who understood my world without being directly in my competitive space. Unlike previous relationships, ours developed with mutual respect for each other's ambitions and accomplishments. I like successful women, he told me on our third date. My mother was the first female partner at her law firm. Ambition looks good on you. For the first time, I found myself in a relationship that didn't require diminishing myself to maintain balance. Michael celebrated my victories and provided perspective during challenges, neither intimidated by my success nor attempting to take credit for it. With professional stability established and personal relationships healthier, I turned attention to broader impact. We launched a mentorship program for young women in technology, providing guidance and opportunities one had lacked. Each time I met with these bright, ambitious young women, I saw echoes of my younger self and felt grateful to offer the support I had craved. Dr. Goldstein helped me process the BBQ revelation and its aftermath during our ongoing therapy sessions. The interesting thing, she observed, is that the external validation didn't actually change your accomplishments. You were already successful before they recognized it. But it changed how I feel about the success I acknowledged. Like it's finally real in some way it wasn't before. That's the wound talking, she replied gently. The part of you still seeking parental approval. The healthier perspective is recognizing that your achievements were always real, always valid, regardless of their recognition. She was right, of course. The journey wasn't about proving my worth to others, but recognizing it myself, independent of external validation. My parents' newfound respect didn't make me more successful, it simply removed one source of emotional discord. The most profound change came in how I CyberShield remained my primary professional focus, but I developed boundaries that allowed for personal relationships, health, and occasional leisure. The company culture reflected this evolution, emphasizing sustainable innovation rather than burnout productivity. 2 years after the BBQ revelation, my parents visited San Francisco for the first time. I gave them a tour of our headquarters, introduced them to my team, and watched with a complex mix of emotions as they finally witnessed the world I had built. It's remarkable, my father said quietly as we stood in the lobby where a wall displayed our industry awards and recognitions. I never imagined. I should have imagined. Yes, I agreed simply. You should have. It wasn't a perfect healing. Some wounds run too deep for complete resolution. But it was a new chapter, written with greater awareness and intention by all involved. Looking back on my journey from the underestimated daughter to recognized industry leader, I realized that the validation I had sought was never actually about professional acknowledgement. It was about being seen, truly seen, by those who had known me longest. The irony was that in building a life beyond their understanding, I had created the very distance that prevented that recognition. The most valuable lesson wasn't about proving critics wrong or achieving external markers of success. It was learning that validation must ultimately come from within, that no amount of external recognition can fill the space where self-acceptance should reside. For those of you watching who recognize your own family dynamics in my story, remember that your worth isn't determined by others' ability to see it. Build your life according to your own definition of success, not someone else's limited imagination of what you can achieve. Have you ever had a moment when someone finally recognized your true value? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that their path is valid, even when others can't understand it. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that sometimes the most powerful validation comes from living authentically, regardless of who notices.